Yeah, hello everyone, and welcome to this third interview in the ongoing interview series at Archi Diaries, which is titled as Shades of Green. Uh, the series in this series we have started talking to various practicing architects, academicians, and many a times people who are engaged in practice and academics also. And the idea here is to talk about their practice, their academics, and how uh, the issues related to sustainable design, sustainable building materials, sustainable technologies gets reflected in their approach. In We had started the series with Sankalpa's interview. Then we had talked to last Saturday. We had a very nice session with Professor Surya Kakani, and already there are very interesting discussions that we have managed to started, going on the board. And I'm really excited to share that today we are going to talk to a very prominent architect and educator, Falguni Desai from Surat. Falguni, welcome to this interview series.
Thank you.
Falguni, thank you so much for agreeing for this interview series and giving us the time by preparing the interview and coming here for this interview. I'm really excited to look at your presentation. Before we go ahead and hand over this to Falguni Desai, I would just like to introduce her. Please allow me to do so. Architect Falguni Desai graduated from CEPT University in 1989. She has been a practicing architect in Surat since 1989. She is currently also a director at Laxmi Institute of Architecture, Sarigam, Gujarat. She is the convener of INTACH, which is Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage for Surat, and also a trustee with TAPI Trust, which organizes TAPI UTSAV, which is a city level festival for Surat. Out of all the hats she wears, education is closest to her heart. She believes we can make a difference in the world with art and design, and the route to this endeavor shall be through education. She's going to talk a little about her journey. She's going to showcase three projects and also discuss what makes their efforts as green as possible. Let me tell you, this description doesn't do justice at all to all kinds of things that Falguni has been engaged with, whether it comes to practice, whether it comes to education. And I'm sure the presentation that she's going to give us will, make this thing very clear. Falguni, can we please have your presentation?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Ayaz. I'll start off right away since we will not have a lot of time either to complete what I have to say and then discuss. I've titled this talk as To Find a Speck of Green because I've particularly not very comfortable saying that all we are doing is sustainable. And hopefully when I finish my presentation, I would have made some sense of the title. In 2012, I built a house in Surat for Nehal Patel, who was a founder of Nature Club Surat since 1984. And his brief itself was extensively packed with ideas which were appropriate towards something that is very right to build in reference to sustainability and ecology. And in 2019, the house we completed in 2013. In 2019, he he created a video of his house and he put it up on YouTube and sort of became viral. And there are almost 14, 15 lakh views, and a lot of people are now beginning to seek me out to question on, how do we build like this. When you invited me to talk about, shades of green and approaches to this whole idea of sustainability, and it kind of set me thinking as to how do you start talking about this whole journey. And so we would have to go back in time. Our firm is called Terrain Design Associates, and this particular named firm was set up in 2007, even though my practice started in 1990. And it's a combination of two terms: it's architectural endeavors and terra initiatives. Those of you know Snehal Nagarshet, who was a professor at CEPT and now director of Anant University Architecture School, we started our practice together, and she actually coined the term. And today I'll talk more about three houses, but then leave something else in between, hopefully, to kind of bring the discussion to its right tone. In 1994, we built this house for Aarti and Anandbhai Chokhawala, and his brief itself kind of came with this whole thing of he wanted a house which was exposed bricks. And if you are a Surti and you just graduated from CEPT, I mean, I graduated in 1989, your first reaction would be to, reject this whole idea of exposed brick in Surat. It rains very heavily, and you would not venture to create something which is exposed to elements, and you probably have moss all over your bricks. But he was quite insistent, and my point is that you kind of end up, your journeys sometimes are initiated by destiny and how things shape it subsequently. Well, it so happened that we actually, went and finally created this home for him. And in those days of hand drawings and, means
Sorry
of...
to disturb you. Are you sharing your screen, Falguni?
Oh, yes, I am. I'm sorry. I didn't
You
realize
haven't
that.
yet shared your screen.
I'm so sorry. So should I just go again quickly?
Yeah. Yeah, please.
Anyways, I'm sorry. So that's the title, yeah, and that's the poster that everybody sees. This was the Eco Home 2012. 2019, he put this video together, and how it kind of became viral, and there are a lot of people watching it, and now I'm getting a lot of inquiries. And yes, when he started saying why talk about shades of green and approaches, I thought we should kind of take this back to this time when we started our journey in practice with Snehal. And this 1994 is the time when we built this house. I'll just quickly minimize this to go to a video so that we can kind of see the house more quickly. And that's a recent video we took after you invited us. In those days, you had to kind of figure out a way to build, to source materials, to choose the right things. What we did was to source the brick from Godhra, because Surat, the soil is not so good for. Learn from Laurie Baker and build in rat trap, and went to Alang and bought most of the wood for the roof. We sourced most of the windows from local houses and reshaped it to to create this house. Now, what set off as an inquiry by the client who says, I want to do exposed brick, kind of created a set of whole body of language of building with brick, cavity construction, because it's appropriate. It allowed us to work with the systems. It was something where we were able to bring the tone of something set in Ambavadi in the right way. In those days, there were very few discussions on either sustainability or ecologically appropriate materials. But somehow reusing something which is sourced from somewhere else was almost 50% of this house. The windows, the roof system, the panels, wood, everything was sourced from Alang. And windows we sourced from local market and actually had fun with it. I mean, you can see that we kind of reworked the windows for various purposes of elemental and experiential character of the whole thing. This staircase is also taken from the local old house. So it's it kind of exposed us to this whole idea that, you could be building houses with one, a certain structural technique of working with exposed brick with cavity construction. And also we were introduced to places for which we can source material which is appropriate and even cheaper in those days. So this staircase, this tiles, the columns for the corridor, this wood is from Alang, this bench is from Alang. So, as a practice, it kind of, introduced us to a direction, so to say. Because normally in Surat, it's not just hot and humid, it's black cotton soil. You would normally do not attempt anything load bearing because your soil has typically, its behavioral pattern is its expansion and contraction would be, you cannot anticipate in advance. So you would normally build in frame structure. Once having done this house, two things happen. We could experience that, you can build with load bearing as a system, because in this house, what we did was I'm sorry, I have slightly lost the thread of where my drawings are. One sec. So what we did was, it's basically a system whereby entire ground plate is created on augers, and you sort of do a ground beam and create rat trap bond load bearing walls. Now, that has then gone into a whole language palette for us. And because the house kind of behaved very well in terms of its aging, it lasted very well. It gave us the confidence that, you could be building many buildings in Surat like this, where you up to ground, you can do either RCC or augers and ground beam. And then above that, you can build with brick. And this particular house, in terms of the behavior of rat trap bond, gave us the whole understanding of how to work with brick, not only with that, but also how this whole system works towards introducing electrical conduits, sharing the load. So that whole experience ultimately created a language and a whole team of workers who were able to work with this. So what you are doing is, you are basically creating a whole team which is able to work with something which is appropriate, but also you're creating workers who can continue to work with you in this manner. So you are building up almost a family of people who can execute for you. So slowly over a period of time, this whole idea of load bearing uh, cavity walls where foundation is created out of frames and round beams became a sort of way to start exploring how far can you go with this kind of execution. And you were adding more skills to your workers, and they in turn, these are photographs from different kinds of projects where slowly you are building with this in a slightly more refined manner. You are loading these walls more, and you are adding many projects in your palette which are done in a similar way. But at the same time, what I'm trying to get at is that there is a whole range of people who starts working with you, who are getting comfortable in working in a certain way, and they in turn are training other set of people in working in a certain way, and you are kind of creating a system of construction which is sort of appropriate not only for climate, because it really behaved very well towards cutting down heat inside the volumes, but also as a language of execution and the set of elements which starts coming in your way. So while in one house you created foundation and load bearing walls, in another you started creating lintels with a certain language. In and your workers slowly started getting excited and challenged by your idea of working in a certain way, and they were supporting over a period of time. And what happens is with you have this whole kit of parts that you can take to from one side to the another, and slowly learn from each one and keep adding more refinement to this whole process. And so slowly, in one house, what was RCC started becoming metal, and also that too with the idea that if you go to a rural setting or a setting where you don't have very refined workers, a simple mason and a welder and other people should be, we should be able to train and build. So, what what you find along the way are people who join this whole journey. And the whole idea of sustainability or building in green to me is to be able to take this whole army of people with you who will be able to build for you in a certain manner. Otherwise, you will never be able to manage it. So, we have this contractor who was trained sometimes in 2003, subsequently for other projects. And he's someone who's not really studied deep, but he can train anybody in any site and create a building which is ground or ground plus 2 with the similar systems whereby you know where to put reinforcement, which is you only put reinforcement into corners and onto copings. How do you really put conduits into your electrical systems? And so he's able to then build with a certain manner, and slowly he's training more number of people onto the way. And your stone masons, your woodworkers are continuously refining this process. So while and then the students join in and learn from that, and so there is this whole chain that you recognize and build along the way. And so since 1994 to now, now this workers team, I could send them to any site and they would just take all the materials in that region and try to create many alternatives as to how you can build without us having to be there also. And a whole lot of how you're able to build, for your clients and build in a certain way is because, you're over a period of time, you're able to build a team of people who understand what you are trying to do, respect what you are trying to do, and take it further. So in one site, this is somewhere near Hyderabad and Bidar, and I didn't have to go there. This was maybe about 3 years back. The workers would go, they will explore brick, they will explore earth, they would do rammed earth, they can work with stone. And these are one or two masons who are, who go there, execute things, create options for you, bring economics on plate, and then you choose what to do and start working with the clients on that. So it's a long journey, where you are slowly building up a whole palette of materials, technology, and systems, which are actually sustainable only so far as you're using less cement, steel. Any local worker can build it, and brick is available everywhere. So slowly you may even veer away from very organized, specialized brick from Godhra or any other place. Work with local bricks also, and you are able to not just economize but also bring certain kind of climate control inside your house and make the whole process simple for a few masons to execute. And then it doesn't then remain only one kind of material. Once your team is start supporting you and start respecting what you're trying to do, you can explore all kinds of materials and technologies with them. Because having seen some projects where you've executed them well with them, they will stand by you. When you are experimenting, they will be enthusiastic, and they also build value to this whole endeavor. So just I'll showcase very quickly some of the projects from 2000 to now, till we come to Eco House. This was sometime in 2003. This is the same house. So in Surat, if you are understanding of the soil mechanics, and as a structural designer, you would not normally support something like this where you build G+2 with load-bearing walls and slabs in between. So this is another house in Dumas. Some of them are farmhouses. You take it further to institutional levels. This was not in town, it was in a rural setting. But now you are able to do things because your team is ready and they're able to execute things of all kinds of scales. This is near Ankleshwar. This is also another education institute. This is government project. This is mixed use. This is commercial as well as the residence on top. Over a period of time, the workers, themselves are careful that, your first house stone wall and your fourth house stone wall start improving in shape, character, odambo, finesse. And, you are more or less, ready when your client like Nehal Patel, who comes to you, this was in now 2012, and says that I want all the systems to be appropriate. I have this land parcel and, a 3-bedroom house, which is not a farmhouse. I will stay in it. So, now his brief was, because he's already, he's a learned client. He's a committed client as far as ecology and sustainability is concerned. So half your battle is won. And the brief was to appropriate, put all the appropriate system, water, energy, air. He didn't want to have municipal connections for energy. He didn't want his drainage. He wanted it reused into his own farm. Then he has his own, minor other requirement, like I want to gaze to the stars, and when my daughter studies, there should be butterflies around. And since he was a nature lover, this whole site was already home to animals, birds, and snakes, and where they should be able to live well. So, in a land which he had already bought about maybe 10, 12 years before it came to us, was already a jungle that he had created, and there was a pond in it. And the house is lifted because we anticipate some kind of a flooding in this region in the years to come. So the ground plane is not utilized for living, but it has systems like rainwater harvesting tanks and car parking and a workshop for himself. And the first floor is the main living space. Uh, I would have to go to another slide to be able to zoom into the plant. So, the ground plane is not the house. He had his old mother staying with him at that time. She's now no more. So it had to have a ramped entry to the first floor, which is the main house. Simple house, living, dining, kitchen is one block with all his services on the side. This is a service corridor for washing, etc., and all the green that can happen here. And the bedroom block. He wanted everybody to live on the same floor. So mother's room, daughter's room, his room, their toilets, outdoor toilets are all on the same floor. And on the upper floor, what you have is all the bedrooms are double heighted. In his room, he uses his loft space as his gym. The daughter study on the ground floor and on the first floor and sleep on the upper loft floor. And mother's room, the loft floor utilized as a spare bedroom. And in the living room, the loft becomes a TV room with a terrace on the side. Now, what transpired ultimately is that, and I'm sharing this slide as a lot of writing and list because I feel that if this remains somewhere, it's a list that we don't miss out on. So for comfort, what happens is that, in India, we miss out on chhajjas as an element. So you have very large overhang to protect the walls as well as, not allow the sun to come in. And most of them extend beyond to take also additional green. So all the layers have green. The water body seems to have worked wonderfully well between two blocks to actually cool the house. The sloping roof was to anticipate all the solar energy, and you didn't have to change the shape and all that. So solar and wind were accommodated on top of it. Interestingly, what the client had already experimented with in his earlier house was that instead of just the ceiling fans, he had worked with a lot of inlet fans which would bring cool air, and they will go up and they will be exhausted to hot air out. So there were a lot of small fans into the windows at the body level and at the upper level. In our Ovian house earlier also we had experimented with earth tunnel where you can bring the air through certain levels of earth and bring it to the house and suck it through the tunnel to bring the cool air in. We never had to use it because the house performed pretty well. Here in this house, the similar air movement is passed through the water body in the underground tunnel, and most of the bedrooms have these fans which are, in the extreme heats you can put it on and experiment whether, you bring the cool air in. He has put creepers on one of the roofs and it adds to further cooling. Sprinklers on roofs to add further cooling into extreme heats. But by and large, the house functions pretty well because of all the green that happens all around, the water body, and the overall movement of air that is anticipated into the house. The bedrooms remain extremely cool because of this small water body. You will encounter these fans in various places in the house which are actually designed for the movement of air. Now, this would be needed in extreme summers in Surat. In normal seasons of winters and monsoon, this would not be necessary. For the water systems, now, you see, we mostly miss this whole plumbing as a real big entity into the houses when we are doing sort of, sustainable explorations. Is the entire system of water movement is that his washing machine water is taken up to tanks above, then it goes to WC, then it is treated, and then it goes into the garden. The rainwater, he harvests about 2 lakh liters of rainwater every monsoon. There is this entire water of his toilets is then, goes and it's treated by root zones, and it kind of comes back into vegetable garden. This his energy system, this solar wind combined, and the whole why I feel this house was so well received by people was because in one house, because of clients very good participation, we were able to put all the textbook studies and learnings that we have. All the systems are in place, uh, whether it is water, whether it is sun, whether it is just comfort within the house, but also in this journey you start converting all of this into elements. And I would anticipate that as we progress in this whole inquiry about how do we build sustainability, you will start celebrating this whole idea of sun and wind and water and green and animals, and they will all start towards participating in the final building language in the form that you arrive at, because it's not it it's rationalized around these ideas of comfort, appropriateness, and certain experiences, and it finally comes together where you see everything in one place. Now, we have built before in similar systems, but sporadically. Somewhere we might have done solar energy, somewhere we might have done treatment of water well, somewhere the house is comfortable because of just the character of the walls that they have used. But in one house, to be able to see everything has somehow, piqued the interest of a lot of people, and it is extremely well received now. And for us, there is a YouTube video of this, so if anyone wants to go deeper into what it feels like, can go there. So what was the basic form and shape of the house ultimately becomes green over a period of time, and it starts sitting very comfortably with the land palette in which you are sitting. And I never shot this in early 2-3 years, because to me it had to come to this level where it kind of starts working towards what is intended as green on all levels. Most of the green is edible and useful, so it's either for butterflies or for birds or for eating, and then some for fragrance. So, and there are seasonal changes that you see because you are and I would not take full credit for the way the landscape is shaped. The client himself is very aware, and he knows how to shape this kind of landscape, work around it. So you are, it lives with different seasons differently, because you see around the house vegetables changing every time you go, and it is continuously, kind of ultimately getting surrounded by the jungle that it will take over the entire house. And we are now witnessing the whole form as it is meant to be complete. But the most heartening and most enjoyable part of this whole house is the joy that people who live in this house finally feel. And they keep adding ideas and layers of green and layers of art to this. And yes, as the brief anticipated and asked for, it is continuously surrounded by birds, millions of butterflies in the season, fish live with them in their water body, and as they walk across the house, this birds keep coming and living with them. And the most fascinating element to us was when we were building this house, and these are these tekas that we have to create the wall. Birds started nesting in them, and then we actually created bird nests into these walls, and you know now they stay there. And then he has actually shaped it correctly so that inside they become bigger. And so what happens is that you know there is an intent, there is a believer who is a client, but also we as a team of architects and workers sort of ready for it. We were able to put it all together with very strict supervision by him and demands, and the whole palette now is very exciting to see how it grows and ages with time. Uh, Between 94 Ovian House and Eco House, I'm not sure that the whole intent of how we do architecture changes much. It was always needed to be sustainable. To me, the Ovian House is no less sustainable than what we've done with Eco Home. If you count K value a little more so. But it's a long journey of how slowly people, if you keep at it for long enough, and if you're able to really give answers fully, society slowly accepts it. And people are now beginning to accept, demand, and even marginally experiment also. So this is what Snehal Nagar built for herself now, about 4 years back. And this entire house is the same, wood guy who we buy wood from. We never bought fresh wood later after the first house. All the wood we source is reused wood. And this entire house of Snehal's is built in wooden metal. I'm showing this because, when I started building my own house for my dad in Ambavadi, which is not right now complete, that it's in the process of building, I took 4 containers and put it together as a house. And so it is not about maybe one kind of material. It's always about stretching the limits of the material to its most appropriate use, so the resource is useless, and you are always, in sync with the climate that you are handling. This house is in the process of making, so I would only have a few pictures of this right now. And I guess in another 2-3 months it should get done. Because of COVID, it is not completed yet. So we could be ending this story here with this whole journey of starting to end. And to my mind, what we were taught in CEPT is what it is, that you do what is right, be very, very, very strict with the understanding of climate and materials, and hone the skill base with your workers. But it cannot stop there, simply because in the 30 years of our experiences with architecture, it's not just this part. When you ask to talk about green and you say, what are the definitions of green? Which metaphor can you use? And it says green is the color between blue and yellow. And if you digitally try to combine them, you'll always find gray. And I feel that in most of the endeavors that we do, there's always a lot of gray. Very small, headway that we are able to make with green. And that's why I find the speck of green. And why? Because this is a plate that we made, when in 50 years of CEPT, they asked us to prepare a panel for our work. Now, I have made houses and institutions. And more or less, there is a certain comfort that you have with them. You have your own battles of how far you can do with what you want to achieve. But then there were other projects larger projects, government projects, uh, private trust projects, things that you see around. And what you find is, that society, governments, people in major chunks, things are completely haywire. I mean, you're not even able to put up one dot. In 2001, I had to extensively deal with earthquakes in Bhuj. We did a competition for Bhopal gas tragedy. Surat flooded heavily in 2006. And when you see planning perspectives, larger interventions, the way the cities are growing, we kind of, miss this whole understand of where all can we go and how far can we go. And when you're working with these situations, especially the disasters, the horror stays with you. Because I've worked very closely with certain situations. And so what happens is, one part of you is architecture. You're making buildings. Another part is also trying to make some sense out of it, outside of just architecture. And that's why, you did ask me early on as to how come you're doing too many things. Is you're trying to find an answer to how can you really make a little more sense than what you are doing. And, somewhere in this journey, I was doing a memorial at Dandi. The project remained incomplete, and, that's another story altogether. But when you are, in your learnings of and questioning of sustainability, a whole lot of things are beyond your reach. So then is it all, futile? I mean, can we just put this aside and say we can't do much? No. I mean, what I'm beginning to even question and work more towards is that you're now working towards lastingness and use. You're trying to ask your clients to build a little small. When they say we can break and make a new building, you say, let's see if we can retrofit and rebuild. And then, empathy, humility, simplicity, frugality, all that begin to make a lot of sense. On one side, you were really all your life struggling with material palettes, structural systems, what to do right, what is sustainable from the engineering perspective. But there's also the other side. And that other side is about coming together, the whole act of cooperation. Whatever little that you are able to do is also because your client is a believer, your worker is a believer, and you are a little ready for it. And so that's why the other forays that happen in your life. And, what I do otherwise is, because I am de facto I say, because when I became the convener of INTACH, it's also by some sort of destiny that they were going to take down a bridge and somebody had to fight. So it was me. But what we are trying to do with this is that you take up one city, take up one place, and try to, bring people together to do something right. So in that endeavor, in INTACH, we do very extensive documentation of natural systems and also the build traditions. With this TAPI Trust was formed in 2016. It does City Fest, but it brings like-minded peoples together every 2 years. A whole lot of students participate in as volunteers. And it's a place where we hope that we will have dialogue with people of the city, but also it creates a platform where you can reach the larger people, larger crowd, and have meaningful conversations. And that's been a very encouraging platform in which you can talk about art, design, architecture, but ideas that matter, issues that matter. The school is school is about 5 years old, where I'm a director, and it's in a rural setting in South Gujarat. And we want to continue working in this rural setting because somehow it feels that you can actually make a difference, and it's a very interesting place to be in. Uh, and education will somewhere will will ultimately, I feel, it's about bringing more people into this fold. So end of the day, there's a whole lot of people can come together in what we are trying to do and say by by this whole act of learning and teaching. So now I'm learning. I'm doing my master's in landscape design because now I'm learning geology and hydrology and horticulture in a greater detail. But yeah, you know, uh, our firm was and is called A Terrain Architectural Endeavours. Uh, it's architecture. I think we manage a little bit. Terra initiative is something which is still long way to go, where you are able to make sense of your role on this earth. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you'll have to stop sharing your screen.
I should stop sharing.
Yeah.
I asked.
Yeah, you will have to stop. You'll have to stop sharing your screen.
I did that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Falguni. It was so nice to see the whole journey. Uh, and it has truly been inspiring. Man, I've got an opportunity to go through this presentation that you sent me. I've been going through, and in this presentation, you have added a lot more stuff also, and it's been very inspiring personally for me also, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this would have some questions, and for them also, it's very inspiring. My I'm just trying to trying to understand uh, this the kind of a range of things that you have been doing, and I started by understanding first the title that you gave was a very intriguing title to find a speck of green. But then when I looked at the range of things that you have done in your presentation, it slowly started becoming clear, and with this presentation, it's even more clear. The way I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are two kinds of things that you have talked about. And one is where you are talking about the field of practice, and which is where you are engaged with the architectural projects and the other projects, which is essentially, let's say, your practice part of it, and where you have talked about various kinds of things in terms of materials, in terms of passive cooling, uh, all kinds of things that we now talk about. The second part, which you came later on, is where when you are discussing the issues that go beyond the realm of architecture, and now in the field of practice, I have certain certain questions for both the realms. But is it the title of your firm, which you have said, the terrain, has because you said that there are two entities in there. One is architectural endeavors, and the other one is terrain initiatives. Has also got to do with the same two facets of your work.
Yeah, it is. See, like I said, I started my practice with me and Snehal were working together. We were called Desai Derasari Architects then. In 2007, Snehal joined CEPT and she had less time to actually full-time work as practitioner. So in between, my journey took me to another organization where I was a partner for almost 7 years. No, 2003 to 7 was actual time, but I was engaged in that firm. 100 people under me and an engineer, and we were doing all kinds of work: real estate, tourism, planning, you know. And in those years, we I mean, I was able to zoom into this whole idea of planning. Kind of, it lays because you are a partner in a firm and you are doing town planning, you are doing TP schemes, and in from 2004, because of just some understanding that we had to have with planning, I got in touch with a professor called MD Desai who was working a lot on water of the region. And I started looking into that with him. And, you beginning to, understand the other scales very much in detail because we are actually putting interventions there. As an architect, you don't always get to do both. So there you sense that, whatever you think that you are doing as an architectural practice is still, you get this understanding of these two scales very, very well. And so by the time when 2006 flood happened, I, I knew what was wrong as a system, as a city. So my personal study and battle has been with an understanding of water, and I've gone all the way to doing public interest litigations and stuff. And I'm sort of somebody branded anti-development in this town, and most of the officers and people fear my presence in any of their premises because so I've done that at some point, and but it didn't bear much fruit except some of the sites were banned for construction and the builders may still blame me for it now. But your inquiry about the whole issues of sustainability starts expanding. And then in that company, we were doing work with earthquake regenerative. Again, it was bizarre. So, you see that the way we operate outside of our small world of architecture, you know, there is neither acceptance nor understanding, a whole lot of ignorance, and we keep adding layers and layers of interventions into it. So it remains parallel, in your head, and hence you keep somewhere try to make sense out of it all. So that's why I said that now you you don't want to talk about climate change globally. You only want to understand common sense locally. Because when you go to villages and towns, and people understand their resources, they safeguard. So you just want to take one place, one location, and try to bring people together to do something, try to educate them, and be less angry. I used to be very vocal and very vehement about certain issues earlier. Now I sense that you have to be able to take people along, maybe educate them, talk to them, somehow make them aware. So first step would be to get your database right, get your understanding of your own place right, get your statistics right, or whatever matters. Then, so there are these 2-3 platforms in which you are able to do this. Like I said, INTACH, you are able to document, map, take some support. With TAPI Trust, again, it kind of, things happen sometimes as destiny. It's not that you are planning it, but they come in your way. And you make sense out of it. So that's how we were invited to do the festival in 2014, but we found this whole platform at a city fest where designers, artists, you can make a better word, but experience very good. So as a team, we set up a trust and we're doing it since 16, 18, 20. And so is it different than what you do as architect? I'm able to harbor a lot of support because my students and my colleagues join us to do those things. People financially support the UTSAV because, well, you are an architect, they know you. So you go to your suppliers and your people and they respect what you've been doing all your life and they support you for that. And I wanted to do research in education because I had applied in CEPT as a graduate. So I went to the school which was starting and I said I want to teach, and they invite me as a director, and I've been trying to shape the school. So sometimes things come your way, but it's because, you can't shake off that as an issue. And that's why both the scales, when you look at the city scale or the region scale and your architecture, I mean, forget globe and Earth and planet Earth, the blue dot that Carl Sagan talks about. We are we are minuscule in our efforts and what we are able to achieve. So education, where hopefully larger number of people, you will be able to instill certain set of values so that more number of people start doing something similar, or at least start questioning the whole thing of right from wrong. And but end of the day, it should be all about joy. I mean, people coming together, doing something. So the big word here would be empathy then, not sustainability, not green, you know, just very simply empathy.
Yeah.
Because if you have empathy for land, water, animals, people around you, things would ultimately turn out right. I don't know if it answers the question. That's why I said don't get me going.
No, I'll just come back to the practice part of what you just presented. You started you showed us the projects which range from let's say 1993 all the way up to 2017. And in your presentation also somewhere earlier you have mentioned that in the earlier your houses you were experimenting a lot with brick and the concrete, and that was also like in this presentation we could see how you were able to achieve the load bearing despite working in a region which has a black cotton soil. So there was a struggle with which, and you could still find the solutions and convince the client and do that thing. My You have also mentioned that all this was already there as a part of the teaching at SAP, and
Yes.
if you look at the core concerns when we talk about the sustainability, have always remained the same. You want to be sensitive
Right.
to the context, sensitive to the energy, sensitive to the resources, and those issues will always remain the same. When we talk when we whether we talk about 1993 or whether we talk in today's context. But on the other hand, when I look at the past 20-25 years journey, there are a lot of things have changed. The way, the pace at which constructions has happened around us, and also because of which a lot of problems have occurred. A lot of new materials, new technologies, etc., have come, and there is a kind of a change at that level that has occurred. And when I look at your later projects that you showed by, is there is a slightly different approach. You are not more using the brick and the concrete, but you are trying to reuse a lot of materials from, let's say, using container, etc. So, is it has there? Do you think there's some new materials or new approaches, new tools will be are required, or a new way of looking at materials would be needed as we go along?
Uh, one one would ultimately, you know, zero into the appropriateness of context and, choices. Now, any place that you take will offer certain opportunities, and so right now after this whole eco house became viral, I have able to talk to people and start discussing design strategy for very different parts of the country. So there is a house I have to question in Visakhapatnam and one in Uttarachal. Now, as I showed in one slide, where you go to the site and see what is the material palette available, and the whole choices of how you build will be ultimately decided by the context, availability of material, and economics of the whole endeavor. But yes, you are conscious very strongly about reusability part, and I'm doing a little bit of concrete as far as possible. In eco house, because of certain humidity condition in of the town, Nehal Bhai was very vehement that I will definitely not use a lot of metal. Otherwise, my personal choice would have been a simple tin roof with some kind of a mechanism to cool it. Even a second layer or a cavity at that level want to also bring on board. But I don't think newer material is the term that we want to use. The term that we want to use is that whatever material that you choose out of certain constraints of either context or economics or appropriateness, you use them in the most appropriate way. To me, it's not as if concrete is bad, or the brick is right, or metal is brilliant. It's just that you have used some material more often than not, so you understood its working so well that at least, so if I, what I'm trying to say is, if I have done this cavity wall construction so many times, I can really use it the most effectively because I've seen its behavior, I've understood it, I've seen where all it can go, and at up to which limit you can use it. So that way, sometimes your material palette remain, within certain range. As far as education is concerned, I mean, we are encouraging our material studio, and research into materials is very, very rich and encouraging, in the college, because we believe that that's the science that we will all need to know very well as next level of designers.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. So it's basically it's not getting fixed to a material or something. It what you're saying is that it's going to be looked at. So from project to project, it will be evaluated. From context to context, it will be evaluated, and that's how it makes more sense to approach the material. My my other question is this question also came up in the last interview with Surya, and something that has intrigued me also, and I'm going to ask you. One is uh, that we have the concerns related to the sustainability, concerns related to, let's say, the passive cooling, and on one hand we want to approach all of that, the material we want to economize, and on the other hand, as an architect, there are certain qualitative aspects related to the spatial quality of the space or a light or anything that you want to achieve. Now, what is your approach? Do you find these two things different, or is it one? What is the design process? Let me take one example for you. This house at Piperdi, the first house in '93 that you did. So the way I understand that, there is a brick simple volume which runs a rectangular, which is opening on one side to the veranda, and there is a stone wall which takes a curved shape around that particular house. Now that's a very architectural expression, and it doesn't come from, the way I understand it, it doesn't come from any, let's say, material or the sustainable thing, the issues. So how do you balance this? What are your ideas on this?
Then and now, allow a training and intuition to guide the process. If it doesn't fit into the economics and it's completely counterproductive to the journey, then you drop it. Otherwise, design will remain an extremely intuitive process. In today's times, with certain consciousness, that's why I say that people, I mean, it would get TARI certificate or something else, though those issues were never discussed, and even now I don't do it. But my point is that intuitively we are trained to react to everything, be it climate, be it now we have to be a little more conscious with reference to the way we use water, which is a completely new issue altogether. In terms of, I mean, we have to know plumbing, and most schools don't tell us that very well while we are studying. And you got to know absolute energy use and understand that daylighting of what kind is going to be correct. But that's a whole lot of systems that will come into our work and how we handle it. But in terms of the whole basic notion of architecture and what we may call as the right architecture has not changed. So intuitively, something there's a very interesting discussion that Charles Eames has with some students, where he's talking about it's all about constraints. So then he's asked, so what about beauty? It's one of the constraints. So in a sense, if you're doing something either for aesthetics or simply out of an intuitive, notion of doing something, it's one of the constraints. Now, if it fits into your overall checklist of right and wrong and economics, I would say go for it. Don't let the joy out of architecture go away simply because you are now continuously challenging that. Oh, am I sustainable? That's what I'm saying. I'm very uncomfortable talking about sustainability because it was never meant to be a separate discussion. It should not be a separate discussion.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I
So
understand your point.
that's why the 94 house and 2017 house, I see, no real difference, except that with a client who was affording and who already had an understanding of all the systems that have to be in place. It is interestingly now a place where you can see that it is doable and you are able to now share economics of the same with people. You are able to share. So now this house will set off chain reactions, and we may build some more where we are now able to share accurately.
We would like to culminate this talk here with a note that this was the third interview in which we talked about architect Falguni Desai from.
Thank you, Ayaz.
Yeah, now I can see you. Thank you so much, Falguni. I know I keep losing you, but that's all I wanted to say. I think on behalf of my whole team, we are really thankful to you.